I think as most of you know, I'm doing engineering, and engineers like graphs. So I think we're going to use a graph today to talk about something. Hopefully that's useful, and we'll see how it goes. So we heard this morning about the life of John the Baptist, and I think that's fair. He is the one that said the words that our theme is based on. And if you read in the devotion books, there is in our camp booklets, there are devotions at night for each of the nights. And yeah, you find something there about John the Baptist, something else about the Apostle Paul, and about King David. I think prominent figures that we would sort of expect to see when we're talking about themselves decreasing, or ourselves decreasing, and the Lord increasing. Today, I'm not going to look at one of them. You might be able to see, you can read my terrible handwriting. I'm actually going to look at King Nebuchadnezzar. He's probably not the type of person you think about when it comes to this sort of thing. But I think part of the goal when you're looking at the phrase, he must increase, but I must decrease, is an idea of humility. And there's always that idea of, like we're talking today in our discussions, that if you are proud, you're not going to love certain people you think that are below you. Right? Or if you're proud, you're not going to be willing to forgive certain people. So there is this need for humility, and that comes across in the idea of I must decrease. But also, as hopefully we'll see today, this often comes, when people are proud, they tend not to think highly of God. They tend to think lowly of God when they're proud. So we'll sort of take a look at that today. There's one sort of main difference between Nebuchadnezzar and ourselves, which is in Nebuchadnezzar's life, I think God humbles him quite often, and God can humble us. But I think the better thing for us to do is to humble ourselves before the Lord. So I think it's 8 points that I'm going to look through. And they're basically going along in time in the first 4 chapters of the book of Daniel. And we're going to sort of see how King Nebuchadnezzar, at these different points in time, thought of himself, and at least based on his words, what he thought of God. Often his attitudes changed over time, and you read of him saying one thing in one chapter, and the next chapter seemingly going against it. So hopefully we'll sort of see a little bit of that progression. But we're sort of going to look at that and see what lessons we can learn from it. So the first passage is Daniel chapter 1, verses 6 and 7. Someone have that and want to read out loud for us?
Verse 6 and 7.
Yeah, just verses 6 and 7.
Now from among those of the sons of Judah were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. To them the chief of the eunuchs gave names. He gave Daniel the name Belshazzar, and to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, and to Azariah Abednego.
Okay, so in this verse we hear of 2 things. So to start with, the names of 4 Jewish boys that were taken captive to Babylon. And they'll come across in the story. So the first one, and the one the book is named after, is Daniel himself. So as is in Old Testament times, and sometimes in New Testament times, names have a meaning to them. And so the meaning of Daniel's name is God is my judge. If you like languages, the L at the end usually means God. You can work out the rest if you know Aramaic or Hebrew. You've got that title in his name that refers to the Most High, that refers to the one true living God. Similarly, you look at his friends. Hananiah means Yah, or that's sort of short for Yahweh, has been gracious. That comes in the I part. I think you'll see that later. Mishael means who is what God is, and Azariah means Yahweh has helped. Okay, so they're sort of the 4 names of Daniel and his friends. And when you see that, you see sort of the dedication to God that their parents would have given them, and that they would have had sort of in the kingdom of Babylon. But they're not allowed to keep those names. So as you see in verse 7, their names get changed. So the one probably less familiar with is Daniel going to Belteshazzar, and that means Bel will protect. So originally it meant God is my judge. Now it means Bel will protect. Who is Bel? Bel is one of the Babylonian gods. Can't remember which god. But importantly, it's a pagan god. Going from the one true living God, and that is the person that will judge, to the pagan god that will protect. Shadrach means inspired by Aku. Aku, again, another one of the Babylonian gods. And it's their name being changed from service to the true and living God to that of the Babylonian God. Meshach means belonging to Aku, and Abednego means servant of Nego. That one you can probably get if you know Arabic, because like Abd, servant. And Nego is just the name of another one of those Babylonian gods. So that is how the Babylonians named these Israelites. Okay. They changed their names that spoke of the relationship with God and their consecration to Him, to the relationship with Babylonian idols and this people. So it's not exclusively Nebuchadnezzar. You'll notice the chief of the eunuchs is the one that did it, but I'm going to give him some responsibility for the actions of those who are below him. So I wanted to do, okay, how he thinks of himself in red. That's sort of why those circles are there. And what he thinks of God in grey. So we'll start with God, I think. So we notice that they've changed their names away from those that were initially serving God. And I think that's because, and we'll see this more in like the later passages, that's because they don't think highly of Israel's God. Even though, despite the fact that if you read at the start of Daniel chapter 1, the only reason King Nebuchadnezzar took Jerusalem in the first place is because God handed them over to him. So this sort of x-axis in the middle, so that it can be 0 and it can go negative. So I'm going to say opinion of God, let's just start it here, right? Somewhere below 0. It's not looking good. Opinion of themselves, though, and their own Babylonian gods, of Bel and of Aku and of Nebu, I think a little bit higher. So let's go there. Okay, that's probably the most obscure point. I think the rest will be a bit more clear, but we'll get to it in a second. So the next thing I want to look at is in Daniel chapter 2. So quick summary of Daniel chapter 2. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream. I think it's a dream that we're all familiar with. He sees an idol, the head of which is gold, followed by sort of body of silver, I think, and then thighs of bronze and legs of iron, and feet of mixed clay and iron. So he has this dream, and he gets his wise men, and he asks them to interpret this dream. But unlike a normal person, he doesn't tell them the dream for them to interpret it for him. He asks them to tell him the dream, because once they tell him the dream, he'll know that they can translate it. And there is some reason to that. When I was younger, I used to thought that's like a very reasonable request. Like, yeah, like if someone can tell you what you dreamt, they can probably tell you what it means. But the probably less reasonable part about it is he then threatens to kill them and their families and everything if they don't tell him the truth. So it's not the best of decisions. Anyway, that is what's happening in Daniel chapter 2. But after that, Daniel hears of this and offers to interpret the dream. We actually read at the end of Daniel chapter 1 that Daniel was given the ability to interpret dreams. Read that, I think, the last few verses of Daniel chapter 1. And so Daniel prays with his friends, with Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and God gives him both the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had and the interpretation of the dream. So that is summarizing that, so we wouldn't have to read the 45 verses that come in the chapter. I just want us to read King Nebuchadnezzar's reaction in verses 46 and 47. So this is Daniel 2, 46 and 47. Maybe I'll read that one. Then King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, prostrate before Daniel, and commanded that they should present an offering and incense to him. The king answered Daniel and said, "Truly your God is the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and a revealer of secrets, since you could reveal the secret." So this is a nice change from the threatening to murder people's families king that was in the previous verses. But I think there's two things to note here that will give us our points for the graph. So the first one is that he goes and he lies down prostrate in front of Daniel. So we don't know what that means. It's just him falling on the floor, not exactly lying down. I like to think of it as the way the Muslims pray, when they're on their knees, bend all the way down. It's the idea of being prostrate. It's a very humbling position, very vulnerable position, and it's not something befitting of a king. More of it than not. So I think this is his maybe first act of humility, I think, that we see throughout the book. So I'm just going to flip the point there. But also he makes a proclamation about God. He says to Daniel, truly your God is the God of gods, because you've been able to interpret this dream. So I think in this brief moment, he has like a perspective that God is not just like another God. He's not just like Nabu or Aku or whatever their names were earlier. God is a God of gods. And I think he gets like a better sense, I know it's running out, a better sense of who God is. Actually, it's difficult. That's this one. Next one is in Daniel chapter 3, verses 1 to 6. Can someone read that for us?
Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 60 cubits and the breadth thereof 6 cubits. He set it up in the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent together the princes, the governors and the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces, to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And they stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, to you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at the time when you hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, you fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king has set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth, shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so keep in mind that this happens, well, not necessarily just after the previous chapter, but it does happen after the previous chapter timelines. But yeah, here King Nebuchadnezzar has built a great statue. It's not specified that the statue is of himself. It could be of a god or it could be of something else. It wouldn't surprise me to be of himself. I think you've seen what he's like in the previous chapter. But the important thing is he tells everyone to sort of bow down and worship the statue. This sort of seems to go against the phrase he just said in the previous chapter, that Daniel's God is the God of gods. And I think it does show a little bit of, I don't know, maybe that forgetfulness that we often show, of forgetting God's mercies and the things that God has done in the past. Or it just sort of speaks to maybe the impulse nature of the earlier comment. But yeah, I think the request for people to bow down and to worship this image that is of a God that's not like the one true living God, and even the one true living God doesn't want statues of him, I think shows both a lack of understanding of who God is, as well as like a low sort of understanding of who God is, as well as a sense of pride that the king himself is the one that like is commanding this and telling people to sort of worship. Let's switch to black for the other one, because it always comes up better. Okay, so how does he think of himself in this passage? So I think higher sort of depends on whether the image is of himself or something else, but I think high enough that he is commanding the worship of other people and commanding that towards other things. But as you think of God, I think we've gone from the God of gods to a God that's not even being acknowledged and not even being sort of worshipped. And his servants, as we see later on, will be like threatened with death once again for not listening to him and for disobeying. Okay, so that brings us to later on in this same chapter. Okay, so let's read Daniel 3, 13, 15. So, as we know, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah don't bow down to the statue. They refuse, they stay standing. And this does not go unnoticed by the king. And so when the king hears of it, you'll hear his reaction in verses 13 and 15, or 13 to 15. So, then Nebuchadnezzar, in rage and fury, gave the command to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, so that they brought these men before the king. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods, or worship the gold image which I have set up? Now if you are ready at the time you hear the sound of the horn, flute, harp, lyre, and psaltery, in symphony with all kinds of music, and you fall down and worship the image which I have made. Good. But if you do not worship, you shall be cast immediately into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? I think there are a few things that are quite telling in that passage. The way that it started was one, that you don't serve, that you don't serve my gods or worship the golden image which I have set up. I think that's one thing of your worship should be directed towards my gods and sort of the thing that I've done. But I think maybe the most telling thing is that last line in the last verse. And who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? Unlike the previous passages, this is not just sort of passive, ignorance of God, or just saying that God is one of the gods. This is actively saying that I am more powerful than any god. Right? What is the God that can deliver you from me, the king himself? So, would you agree with me? I think pride is probably a bit higher than the other ones.
Yes, Jake.
Thanks, mate. I'm okay with nodding. It's alright. I don't have to speak. And I think contempt for God is much lower as well. So, sort of stop like that. Now, this is not really relevant to the main point at hand, but I do have to look at the reactions of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, just because it's so amazing. And because I can't really imagine how I, in their position, would react. I mean, there are some people, Peter would be one of them, who, when Jesus asked him, will you die for me, or Peter says to him, Lord, we would die for you. And that I did. Go to the cross, go to death for you. And we know that will happen eventually in his life, but that when the time comes, he does deny Christ. But for me, I don't know. I really can't say what I would do in those positions. You'd want to stay faithful. I'd want to stay faithful to God and to know that He's able to do it. But I just can't tell you how I would react in that situation. Maybe bringing it a bit more realistically, might be a question of, how do we react in maybe far less trying circumstances, right? Maybe we're not going to be put in front of a fiery furnace and asked to go inside it. But how do we react when someone else either threatens to deny your faith, or someone who's not particularly positive towards faith or your faith in general? Have we denied our faith in far less trying circumstances than the fiery furnace and the thing that Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah went through? Like I said, if you look at Luke 22:54-61, you get that example of Peter, where in front of not a king who's going to threaten you, in front of a servant girl, he did deny Christ. And I think that serves to us, it's an example of a Christian, a prominent Christian, who did do this. That these things can happen to us, right? Not to think of ourselves immune to it. But that aside, how did Daniel's friends actually react? Well, that's in verses 16 to 18. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego answered and said to the king, O Nebuchadnezzar, we have no need to answer you in this matter. If that is the case, our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and He will deliver us from your hand, O king. But if not, let it be known to you, O king, that we do not serve your gods, nor will we worship the golden image which you have set up. I think that's just a really amazing response. For one, he starts with, who is the God who will deliver you from my hands? And they start with, well, our God, whom we serve, is able to deliver us from your hands. But the thing I think that's truly amazing to it is not just He is able, it's even if He doesn't, right? We know that He can do it, and He might do it. But even if He doesn't do it, we will not bow down or serve your gods. I think that's sort of an amazing sense of faith. I always wonder sometimes that God is able to do something, but you don't know if it's in His will. Do I know God will do this, or will He not do it? Does He want something else from me? And I think the faith to be able to say, if God doesn't want it, then we are still happy with that decision. If God does want it, we will obey Him. And I think that is the faith that I always find to be quite remarkable. It's not entirely related to this, but I think that is an example of them not thinking of themselves too highly as to go to death, and thinking of God as who He really is, the sovereign one who is able to save. So I think here Daniel's friends are indeed showing us that they are decreasing and God must increase. Okay, our next study in King Nebuchadnezzar will come in Daniel 3, 24 to 30. So it's just sort of at the end of the passage. So before that, yeah, okay, I'll just read it first. Okay, so then King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished. So I'm just thinking, yeah, King Nebuchadnezzar was astonished, and he rose in haste and spoke, saying to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered and said to the king, "True, O king." "Look," he answered, "I see 4 men, loose, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt, and the form of the 4th is like the Son of God." Then Nebuchadnezzar went near the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and spoke, saying, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came from the midst of the fire, and the satraps, administrators, governors, and the king's counselors gathered together, and they saw these men on whose bodies the fire had no power. The hair of their head was not singed, nor were their garments affected, and the smell of fire was not on them. Nebuchadnezzar spoke, saying, "Blessed be the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who sent his angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him. And they have frustrated the king's word, and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. Yeah, so this is his response to the remarkable thing. 3 men get thrown into a furnace, and the people who threw them in get burnt. The people who are in the midst of the fire, definitely the hottest part, are still fine. And what's more, there's a 4th person there, someone like completely different. I think King Nebuchadnezzar calls him who sent his angel and delivered his servants. I think this can often be seen as a theophany, when it's Jesus coming in the form of an angel, the Son of God himself. But yeah, King Nebuchadnezzar, I think, fairly surprised and shocked by this. And his reaction, particularly in verses sort of 26, 28, 29, is an element of praise towards their God. Keep in mind, there's still an aspect of he doesn't understand who God is, and you see that in the idea of anyone who doesn't worship him will get cut into pieces and the house burned down. I feel like it's just old habits die hard, right? You know, kill people. But I think there is a better sense of who God is than before. But also, in terms of who he is, there is a line where he says that he uses that their God frustrates the king's word. I think it comes in verse 28. His angel and delivered his servants who trusted in him, and they have frustrated the king's word and yielded their bodies, that they should not serve nor worship any god except their own God. I think there is a little bit of like awareness here, where he realizes that your God is more powerful than me, right? I said, "Who can deliver you from my hands?" And you told me, "Our God can deliver us." And you're right. God has changed my word, and he has delivered you from it. So I think you do finally get a sense of humility, or another sense of humility from the king in this passage. Yeah. So that is Daniel 3. So on to Daniel 4. I think this is the passage that's most well known for God humbling King Nebuchadnezzar. I'm going to skip the first few verses, we'll come back to them later. But we'll read Daniel 4, 9 to 18. And someone want to read that for us? It's a bit long, but someone read it and then I'll summarize it.
9 to 18?
Yeah.
I said, "Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream. Interpret it for me. These are the visions I saw while lying in my bed. I looked, and there before me stood a tree in the middle of the land. Its height was enormous. The tree grew large and strong, and its top touched the sky. It was visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, its fruit abundant, and on it was food for all. Under it the wild animals found shelter, and the birds lived in its branches. From it every creature was fed. In the visions I saw while lying in my bed, I looked, and there before me was a holy one, a messenger, coming down from heaven. He called in a loud voice, 'Cut down the tree and trim off its branches. Strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But let the stump and its roots, bound with iron and bronze, remain in the ground and the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man, and let him be given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass for him. The decision is announced by messengers. The holy ones declare the verdict, so that they may know that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth, and give them to anyone who wishes, and sets over them the lowliest of people. This is the dream that I, King Nebuchadnezzar, had. Now, Belteshazzar, tell me what it means, for none of the wise men in my kingdom can interpret it for me, but you can, because the spirit of the holy gods is in you.
Okay. So, yeah, this is probably Nebuchadnezzar's dream that we're slightly less familiar with, a little bit less than the idol thing. So he dreams of a really, really big tree that mentions a few things about the tree, like provides like food for all the earth, and like the beasts find shade underneath it. And then this tree gets cut down. So read that in sort of verse 14, or at least there's a command to chop down the tree and have its branches cut off. And then a sort of cryptic message about let his heart be changed from that of a man. You sort of wonder, what is that referring to? So that's sort of his dream. The dream does trouble him, as you see. There is a strange thing where King Nebuchadnezzar, still after the last few chapters, he actually turns to the wise men to interpret this dream first. So I think it comes in verse 7, or verse 6. Therefore I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. And the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in, and I told them the dream. It's finally that from his lesson earlier. But they did not make known to me its interpretation. And then at the end, but at last Daniel came before me. So he still sought the opinion of these other wise men first, but eventually he sees the opinion of Daniel to translate the dream. So let's go into the interpretation of what the dream means. So this is verses 19 to 27. Then Daniel, whose name was Belteshazzar, was astonished for a time, and his thoughts troubled him. So the king spoke and said, Belteshazzar, do not let the dream or its interpretation trouble you. And Belteshazzar answered and said, My lord, may the dream concern those who hate you, and its interpretation concern your enemies. The tree that you saw, which grew and became strong, whose height reached to the heavens, and which could be seen by all the earth, whose leaves were lovely and its fruit abundant, in which was food for all, under which the beasts of the field dwelt, and in whose branches the birds of the heavens had their home. It is you, O king, who have grown and become strong. For your greatness has grown and reaches to the heavens, and your dominion to the end of the earth. And inasmuch as the king saw a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven, and saying, Chop down the tree and destroy it, but leave its stump and roots in the garden, bound with a band of iron and bronze in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beasts of the field, till 7 times pass over. This is the interpretation of the king, and this is the decree of the Most High, which has come upon my lord the king. They shall drive you from men, your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field, and they shall make you eat grass like oxen. They shall wet you with the dew of heaven, and 7 times shall pass over you, till you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he chooses. And inasmuch as they gave the command to let the stump and roots of the tree, your kingdom will be assured to you, after you come to know that heaven rules. Therefore, O king, let my advice be acceptable to you. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Perhaps there may be a lengthening of your prosperity. Okay, so Daniel comes to the king, and Daniel is troubled by this dream when he first hears it. And it's not because it's like something bad news for Daniel, it's because it's bad news for the king, or King Nebuchadnezzar himself, and he sees how that guy reacts when he's in bad mood. But the king does say to him something a bit strange: do not let the dream or its interpretation trouble you. At first, my first reading of that, I assumed it was like, don't worry if it's bad, it's just for me, like, don't worry about it. But I did have a friend say, I think he's still not concerned about the interpretation of the dream. I think he's still not grasped the seriousness of the messages that have been sent, especially when it was so clear again. Anyway, so question comes, the whole thing we've been doing. So how does Nebuchadnezzar think of himself at this point in time of the interpretation of the dream, or of the dream itself? So my first point is that the fact that he was getting this dream was because of his pride. And that's what Daniel sort of tells him at the end of the interpretation, to turn away from his sin. I think it's in verse 27. Break off your sins by being righteous, and your iniquities by showing mercy to the poor. Daniel acknowledges that the king has been proud. The king has been sort of forgetting God and not considering God. And Daniel is warning him to not stay like this. So I'm going to put that about here. The points are sort of arbitrary, it's more the trend that matters. In terms of how the king thinks of God, the other fellow, I think it was interesting when Mark was reading, this comes up in all translations I could find except for the New King James, that it talks about Daniel's God Daniel having the spirit of the gods, I think. Yeah, what verse was that in? Verse 18. Yeah, you've got a New King James that will come strange to you because it says for the spirit of the holy God. But in NIV or New King James, it will come across as spirit of the gods. Still one of the gods of the many other gods of Babylon. So I'm going to put this point like down there. Okay. That was when he got the dream and the interpretation of the dream. But guess what? The dream does happen. So let's read about that in verses 28 to 33. Okay. All this came upon King Nebuchadnezzar. At the end of the 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. The king spoke, saying, "Is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty?" While the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven. "King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken, the kingdom has departed from you, and they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you, until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he chooses." That very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men, and ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair had grown like eagle's feathers, and his nails like birds' claws. Okay, so I'm going to take the point in time being like right before the transformation happens, or sort of as the transformation happens. And this one, I think the telling thing comes in like one of the first verses we read, verse 30. Is not this great Babylon? Okay, that's sort of fair. Like even God has been saying to him that like Babylon is a better kingdom than the ones that come after it. You see the gold and silver and bronze. So that's alright. That I have built for a royal dwelling, it's a little bit shaky, by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty. I think this one pushes his pride a little bit higher than the other points. Let's say that. So he's talking about himself and the accomplishments that he has done of his power. And he's ignoring the sort of message of the dream. Admittedly, it was 12 months earlier, but he's ignoring the message of the dream. That the whole point of what is going to happen to King Nebuchadnezzar is to show that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. That's in verse 25. It's not a problem that King Nebuchadnezzar had a kingdom, right? I just came back from camp and we're talking about resources and materials and money and how to use it. It's not a problem if you are rich, or it's not a problem if you have a lot of resources. The problem is when you turn around and say, look at all these things that I have got for myself, right, by my own power, by my own hand. Not considering the God who gave it all to you, but considering the God who's enabled you to have these things. And I think this can be something that we do, maybe not to those exact phrasing, but something we do in our lives. It's very easy to look at things we've done, things we've worked for, things we've studied for, and say, oh, that was sort of just the result of my effort. There I didn't put effort and it didn't go well, there I put in lots of effort and I went really well, and that's all sort of because of me. And it's not saying that God is the one behind the scenes changing us and changing the outcomes to suit sort of his desires and his purposes. So, how does he think of God? I mean, I'm tempted to put it here in the sense that he seems to not think of God at all. But I think it will be, there's like a little bit of contempt in it, so I'll put it a little bit lower than that. Thankfully, there is good news. And we move on to our last passage for today, and that is Daniel 4, 34 to 37, as well as Daniel 4, 1 to 3. We get to go back to the start. Look how time works. Alright, 34. And at the end of the time, I, Nebuchadnezzar, lifted my eyes to heaven, and my understanding returned to me. And I blessed the Most High, and praised and honored him who lives forever. For his dominion is an everlasting dominion, and his kingdom is from generation to generation. All the inhabitants of the earth are reputed as nothing. He does according to his will in the army of heaven, and among the inhabitants of the earth, no one can restrain his hand or say to him, "What have you done?" At the same time, my reason returned to me, and for the glory of my kingdom, my honor and splendor returned to me. My counselors and nobles restored to me. I was restored to my kingdom, and excellent majesty was added to me. Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven. All of his works are truth, and his way is justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to put down. And also, if you go back to the start of the chapter, verses 1 to 3. Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. How great are his signs, and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. So I think this is finally the point where King Nebuchadnezzar begins to really, truly understand who God is. I mean, we saw, like, in the last chapter, that he's like, oh yeah, he seems to understand God is powerful, God is able to save, God can be better than the king. Doesn't quite understand God's mercy and, like, his sovereignty in that regard. But I think it's finally the point where King Nebuchadnezzar realizes that God is the one who does sort of whatever he pleases, and at the very end, who is able to put down those who walk in pride and to humble those who walk in pride. And he's seeing that firsthand in his own experience. So I think we'd sort of agree that it's probably the most humble point. I mean, God's humble, right? You can't go lower than that. And I think this is also the most praise, the most honest praise that he's given and exalts God. So I'm just going to try and connect these points and see how that goes. So this point black to make it consistent. It'll look a bit like a sine curve, I think. If you like maths, a bunch of us do. Alright, that's fine. And this is the yellow one. No, it goes up. Alright. There you go. That's like two sine curves shifted by pi and 4 degrees or something. Yeah, not quite enough. The important thing, I think, to notice, besides the actual shape of the graph, is how they're basically inversely proportional. As one of these things goes up, as Nebuchadnezzar got more proud, as he thought of himself more highly, he considered God less than this, or he contempted God, he put himself above God. And I think the opposite happened. When he was humbled, when he realized, the first time, he fell prostrate on the floor, realized who God was. And at the end, he was turned into a beast and realized who God was. That was when he was at his most humble point, but he realized the power of God and that he really could do nothing without him. I think that is when he sort of had the best understanding of God and who God is. And it made me think of that sort of line, that verse, sort of, humble yourselves before the Lord. So that comes up in James 4, verse 10. A very similar verse comes in 1 Peter 5, verse 6. Humble yourselves before the mighty hand of God. In James 4, verse 6, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. And in 1 Peter 5, 5, the very same verse, I think, God resists the proud but gives grace to the humble. And I think this is the concept that we see throughout the Bible. The kings that God would humble, and then they would turn to God, and then sort of God would give them the grace. And I think it's particularly relevant for this theme of he must increase, but I must decrease. And it's like you can't have him increase. It's like a zero-sum game. You can't have him increase without you decreasing. And you can't have yourself increasing without him decreasing. I think it's sort of the idea behind it. That the more you think of yourself, above God, or even to that point, the less you will think of God and the less you will notice God. Yeah, so I think that's most of what I've found looking into King Nebuchadnezzar's life. How over and over again, the times that he thinks of God the least, is when he thinks of himself the most. And in his example, God humbled him, and brought him down to a point so low for him to finally realize that God is sovereign and is the one that has the power like over all things. So I think God's prayer for us, or what God wants us to do, is to humble ourselves. We sort of started with that, humble yourselves before the Lord. And it's basically humble yourself or God will humble you. And people will pray for God to humble them, but I think God humbling you is not an easy process. It's going to be a painful process. And that's why we're sort of called to humble ourselves before the Lord. So I'm just going to close off in a word of prayer, and then we can chat on. Dear God, Heavenly Father, I thank you for your word that you've given us. I thank you for this example that you've shown us of a king who was proud and didn't think of you, and you humbled him, and he did consider you. I pray that we might be able to humble ourselves before you, that we might be able to think of ourselves less, and that we might be able to acknowledge that you are the one who is sovereign, you are the one who does what you will, and no one is telling you what to do. I pray that we might realize this throughout the rest of camp. We might continue to learn from the examples of others, that we must decrease and you must increase. I pray this all in your Son's name. Amen.